Hello, my name is Paul Wilson Jr., Area Director of the UGA Small Business Development Center at Georgia State University. This is your business tip of the week. It is a major understatement to say that in 2020, businesses have seen an unprecedented level of challenges. And as consumers, we've experienced some things this year that we probably never would have thought in our lifetime we would have seen. Things like a shortage of toilet tissue or cleaning supplies, like basic cleaning supplies, right? Or even in electronics, webcams. All of these things at one point in time this year, we've seen either delays or disruptions in being able to easily acquire those from the stores that we go to. So what's common about all those products and many others that there's been delays, right? Or major back orders in terms of acquiring those products and services from the stores that we buy from. The common factor is their supply chains, right? That's something as a consumer we never really think about, because all we think about is going to a store and picking something up off the shelf. But corporations, large corporations, right, spend a lot of time managing, strategizing, and facilitating their supply chain management processes. Well, what is a supply chain anyway? Well, I come up with a real simple definition. And that's basically all of the processes, policies, and procedures that it takes to get the right product from the right source at the right time, at the right quality, at the right price, right? All those factors come into play for a company to have an effective supply chain management process so that you can get your toilet tissue when you show up at the store. But of course, this year it's obvious. We've seen the outcomes of what happens when these companies' supply chains get disrupted. Well, that just doesn't apply to big companies. It applies to small businesses too. You just may not have used the terminology of supply chain, but you absolutely have one. If you have to buy materials in order to assemble your product to sell to somebody else, you have a supply chain. If you have to purchase a service that actually may combine with something else that then you sell to a customer, guess what? You have a supply chain. If you have to buy any type of materials or services or products, right, in order to run your business so that then you can sell something to a customer, guess what? You have a supply chain, which means that you have suppliers, right? You may call them vendors, right? It's all kind of interchangeable, some of the language. But the basic point here is that you have to manage your supply chain in order to meet the demands and needs of your customers. So here's 3 things I want you to consider as you manage your supply chain. Number 1 is, who are your suppliers? Of course, most companies are going to have primary suppliers and then potentially secondary. Well, your primary suppliers, are your go-to. They're your main company that you want to buy from. Again, they may have the best quality, may have the best service, right? They may have the best of what they do, which is why you want to buy from them. And most companies, right, put all their eggs in one basket in terms of they buy 100% of their supply from that primary supplier. But what happens when that primary supplier can't supply what you need? What's your backup, right? So you may want to have a contingency plan that you already have supplier B ready and waiting in the wings. You may have already negotiated some terms, but you may just not have put a contract in place. But some companies do, they'll buy 90% of their supply from supplier A and then 10% from B, or maybe 80-20. So that way you always kind of keep that contingency. So if you had to ramp up B from 20% to 40%, they may be able to do that much more quickly than going from 0 to 10 or 20 from that standpoint. So again, consider an alternative supplier based on the things that you buy. Number 2 is consider alternative materials. Of course, you have, again, with that, just like that supplier, you have certain materials that you love, that are necessary, that are required to go into what you're manufacturing. But it may be that you need to look at and say, all right, is there a substitute or an alternative that I can use just in case, again, my primary material is unavailable? And again, that could go for services also from that standpoint. Is there a substitute or alternative that provides just as good or close to a substitution of what you're selling? Because again, if you're disrupted in getting your primary materials, right, maybe you need to have an alternative or a backup just in case. And the number 3 is your inventory management levels. Of course, over the last couple of decades, just-in-time inventory, of course, has become extremely popular, where companies keep just the minimum amount of inventory based on the supply and the demand, so they can keep that inventory off the shelf, right, and flowing to their customers, and you don't stack that much up. But when you're in a tight economic situation like today, and it maybe take longer lead times to get what you're looking for, or maybe more challenging to procure what you need, you might have to keep a little bit more inventory, right? And balance that out with the financial analysis, of course, right? Because if it takes you longer to get what you need and it's harder to get what you need, you might have, when you actually get it, you might have to buy more of it and keep more of it on hand. Because again, until the disruptions level out, you need to kind of plan for the unexpected. All right. So the 3 things for you to think about: an alternative supplier, alternative materials, and maybe adjusting your inventory. So those are just a few things for you to consider as you look for ways to minimize the impact of delays and disruptions in your supply chain so that you can manage it more effectively and profitably in the future. And that's your business tip of the week. Contact us today to take advantage of no-cost one-on-one consulting for your business.